Hey, I'm Emily King. I am 32 years old, and I went to college at University of Mobile, which is local in Alabama, and I majored in elementary education, and so I was a first grade teacher for 5 years. I was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer when I was at the age of 27. So I would say my first symptoms were a little bit of abdominal pain and then blood in my stool. I was living a very healthy lifestyle. I played college tennis. I was a swimmer, and was very active when I was little. My mom thought as a mom, like, I need to feed my children healthy, and so she did a great job at that. And so I was a very healthy kid growing up, very active and everything. And so when I ended up going to the ER, for blood in my stool, and I had a doctor come in and tell me, hey, it might be cancer. My husband and I were at a complete shock. Since I was having stomach pain, they did a CT scan, and he said, for some reason, I felt like I needed to glance and look at your colon, which he's like, as a 27-year-old, like, I shouldn't have to do that. But he did, and he saw a tumor. And so at that point, it couldn't have been a better doctor to tell me it could have, like, it might be cancer. He was so gracious about it. He took his time. He sat there with my husband and I as we processed the news. And it was just like at such a disbelief because of how healthy of a lifestyle I was living. I was like, there's no way it's cancer. And so we kind of just went through it as like, it's a tumor and they're going to remove the tumor, and just kind of go from there. And so I stayed in the hospital, did colonoscopy the next day. The doctor who did my colonoscopy came in and he said, hey, I got through, could barely get through. The tumor was so big. It's in your transverse colon, which is like the longer part of your long intestine. And I said, okay, is it cancer? And he said, I don't know. And he like turned on his heel and walked away, which was really upsetting to me. But like knowing down the road, like, oh, he couldn't legally tell me until they get like pathology and stuff back. So he directed me then towards the surgical team, and the surgical team was like, we got to remove it. So they removed a foot of my colon and 23 lymph nodes, and 13 of them had cancer in them. And so we didn't find out that diagnosis till about a week later. I got a phone call, and then I started having stomach pains. And my stomach pains were due to them stapling my colon back together instead of sewing my colon back together. And so I had scar tissue that went straight down my colon and was blocking all stool from coming through. And so I was having a bowel obstruction. And so I was having like very severe contractions for my stool trying to pass through. And so went into the hospital. I was no food, no water for a week. And I was on Dilaudid, which is like the super huge, pain medicine. And because I was only on Dilaudid for a week with like no food, no water, because they were trying to like break the tissue. What they ended up doing was giving me a little bit of a steroid, and that opened up the gates, which I'm very thankful for, because they were talking about a colostomy bag. And when the lady came in to talk to me about a colostomy bag, she was like, all these celebrities have this colostomy bag. And I was like, get her out of here. I'm so done. Like like I was telling my husband, I was like, no, cannot. And so she left, and then all of a sudden the steroid worked and the floodgates opened up. And so then therefore I wasn't in pain anymore. So I just stopped my pain medicine cold turkey, not knowing, oh, I might be addicted to this drug since I've had it for a week. And so I went through a drug withdrawal, and like I had no idea like what that was, like I've never been through anything like that. And so they 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 were starting to get a little bit worried just because my small intestine was as big as my large intestine. That's like how much was backed up there. But after the floodgates opened, we were all good, didn't do a colostomy, and then I had my port installed for my chemo. Went home, was trying to recover from all of that, and then I came back in for hospital stay number 3. I thought it was my bowel obstruction again, but it ended up being pancreatitis. My gallbladder exploded, which caused pancreatitis. And so they said it was actually life-saving that it exploded when it did, because if it had exploded when I was doing chemotherapy, I could have died. And so they were like, well, it's good that it's exploding now. I'm like, okay, whatever that means. And so then I went home and recovered from that stomach surgery. And then I went back to hospital stay number 4. Unfortunately, my bowel obstruction was back. And so this time they were like, we got to give it a break. And so they gave me an ileostomy bag instead of a colostomy. So it was with my small intestine instead of my large intestine, because they just didn't want anything to go through my large intestine for a while. They wanted to give it like a really good break. And so I got an ileostomy. And then I started my 12 rounds of chemotherapy. So I did 12 rounds of Folfox. And then after I did 12 rounds of Folfox, 2 months later, I got my ileostomy reversed. Thank goodness. And it's permanently reversed. And so we're all good there, which is awesome. But that was something that I was really scared about, because chemo is scary in itself. And then they were like, oh, let's hook this bag onto you. And then also you need to figure that out while you're also figuring out chemo and also healing from what you went through. And so that was really hard for my husband and I to like accept. Like, it didn't matter if it was an ileostomy or colostomy bag, like that didn't matter to us, but it was just like, that's another thing that was on our plate. A lot of people don't realize that cancer nowadays, like they have a specific chemo for your type of cancer, which I'm so thankful for. And so they get to target that. And so for me, it was Folfox with oxaliplatin. Oxaliplatin is like such a poisonous drug. It gives you neuropathy. It gives you brain fog. I couldn't drink anything cold, or else it was like I was swallowing glass. I couldn't touch anything cold. Like I couldn't go grocery shopping and grab things from the freezer section or the fridge section or anything like that. I would like stand up and black out. And, there were just like a lot of different things that being a 27-year-old, like I didn't think I would have to go through. I was going through like premenopause. I didn't know that chemotherapy can throw you into menopause. And so as a 27-year-old, I'm going through that. And so there was just like a lot of ups and downs, and obviously nausea and tiredness, and it was a drug I received every other week, and then you receive it for 35 hours, three different drugs. And so I had to go home with it, sleep with it, bring it back, which some people are like, oh, that's so nice that you get to do it at home. But it's like, no, I would rather leave it at the hospital. I'd rather like my home be my safe place and leave the drug at the hospital. After that, I had no evidence of disease for 6 months, which I was so thankful for. And in May 2020, I received a routine PET scan. They saw a cancer spot again in my colon, removed it from my colon. And then I did 11 rounds of Full Fury, which is like the second chemo that they put you on if Folfox doesn't work. And with that, I was extremely nauseous, extremely fatigued. I didn't have like the neuropathy and things with it, but it was still like a very poisonous awful drug. And after 11 rounds of that, I was 3 months of no evidence of disease. And then another routine scan, cancer showed up in my lungs. And so it declared me a stage 4 colon cancer patient. And so my cancer had moved to my lungs. And so I did 12 more rounds of full fury. And I had such a poor quality of life at that point because I was going every other week and I only had a week to recover. And it takes over a month for chemo to completely leave your body. And so I was just like, I just felt like I was just being put underwater and I just like could not come up and breathe. And it was really, really hard. And so my doctor was like, let's do maintenance chemo for a little bit and let's get you like a little bit of a break. And so I did maintenance chemo for 2 months. So I still took 2,000 milligrams of chemo a day. And I did it for 60 rounds. So I did it for 2 months. And then my cancer, unfortunately, found out how to fight that drug. And so we went ahead and did an immunotherapy, and I did 15 rounds of the immunotherapy. What it was targeting specifically, I have a genetic like protein mutation in my cancer. It's called NHER2, and it's actually very common in breast cancer. You might have heard people say it about breast cancer, but it is also in colon cancer, and so that's what's in my colon cancer. And so they were targeting my my HER2 positive protein with a drug called NHER2, and so what it would do was it would target my cancer cells, and then it would basically like inject chemo into my cancer cells. And so it was an immunotherapy, but it was partnered with chemotherapy. So chemotherapy was still in it. After that, it stopped working, unfortunately. My cancer, again, figured out how to beat it because cancer's smart and I hate that. So my doctor down here did a fellowship up at Dana-Farber in Boston. And I also have family on Cape Cod. I grew up going to Boston. My grandma grew up in Boston. And so he was like, I really think that we need to start looking at clinical trials because I've hit all the notches. There's not much more I can do for you here. Let's see about clinical trials. And so Dana-Farber had one open for me. And I see Dr. Kenny Ng, who's ahead of the early onset colon cancer committee and everything there. She's also a Harvard professor, which is pretty cool. But she was my second opinion down here. And so we were already in communication, which I was so thankful for. But when I went up to see her, this is something that I think is like so important if any like radiologist or anybody is going to watch this is before I was diagnosed with cancer, 6 months before, I was diagnosed with mono. And I started having stomach pains and 6 months before, and they thought, oh my gosh, it's their spleen, because usually mono sparks like your spleen to explode. And so they told me like, go in, you might have to get your spleen removed. And so what they ended up doing was a CT scan, and they decided, oh, it's her appendix. Let's take out her appendix. And in that CT scan was my cancer, and they missed it. And so I would have received like care 6 months earlier than what I, would have. And so what was upsetting is that they weren't even looking in my colon. But like, why would they? Because I was 26 at that point. And so they're like, there's no reason. But we did find out, Dr. Ng ended up telling me they missed it. It's there. I see it. Our radiologist read it. And so anytime we can get to say that to people and just like get that out there is like, I feel like with colon cancer, so many people are misdiagnosed or it's missed because they're so young. And so it was missed for me, unfortunately, but I was kind of the first wave of young people to come through Dana-Farber. I was one of the youngest people that started there. And so what we ended up doing was trying to get my cancer, like, is it genetic? Because I did have a great grandmother that did have colon cancer. She died at the age of 70. But what they told me was, oh, it's not genetic, it's environmental. And so they could not tell me what in the environment caused my colon cancer. And so, of course, you're thinking back, like, what did I eat? What did I drink? Where was I? And you just go into this spiral. But then I've realized, like, I can't live in the past. Like, there's nothing that I can do now other than fight the disease. And so that's where I was. So my husband and I temporarily moved up to Boston for 4 months for a clinical trial. Boston is unreal expensive, so we could not, like, afford to move up there, and the trial doesn't pay you. There, you have to pay your own way. And so we got up to Boston, and I did the trial for 4 months, and then it stopped working. And so I was kicked off the trial. And at that point, they were like, well, we can't just not give you anything. So I went back to Folfox, unfortunately. So it's just kind of just is the ups and downs with cancer, and I know that's part of it. But then I got a random call from Dr. Ng, and she was like, hey, I have this another clinical trial and you qualify, and let's get you up here. And so it was like, not 3 days later, we're back in Boston temporarily. And this time we decided to do, okay, let's do 2 months, and then let's see about the side effects of this treatment. And if there's not bad side effects, we can come down here and I'll just commute. And so that's actually what we're doing right now is my cancer has shrunk 20% on this drug, which I'm so thankful for. Minimal side effects. I do not have nausea. I am just really tired. And but that's it. And I was like, I'll be tired over nausea any day. And so I do commute to Boston every other week. And so I go through a nonprofit. So I think mental health is so very important. I am a Christian, and so my faith is like my number one thing that gets me through. The Lord gets me through all of it. And I have joy when I shouldn't have joy, and I have peace when I shouldn't have peace. And that's weird for some people, and it's weird for me, honestly. And so I'm just very thankful that He's blessed me with that. But also I think a part of healing too, and just like a part of your mental, like your mental health is like helping others where you are. And so what I decided to do was I was just kind of thrown into this, obviously, this cancer community, and I was a first grade teacher for 5 years, and so that's like where my entire life was. And so thrown into this community, I'm like, how can I serve the people in the community that I'm in, that I was just thrown into? And so I started talking to other cancer patients, because when you're receiving chemo, you're like kind of in a ring of people who's also receiving chemo. And so they're like, girl, what are you doing here? Because obviously I was the youngest person there. And and so I got to tell them my story and kind of talk to them like, oh my gosh, I'm so nauseous. Like, if they give me one more pill, I'm gonna lose it. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so they're like, well, I do ginger for nausea, and I do like peppermint for nausea. And then like, it's like, I'm really struggling with these port flushes. Like, they taste disgusting. I want to throw up. And they're like, oh, put Starburst in your mouth, and like that works. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like getting all these tips from these people who have just been going through it. And I was like, why would I share this with other people? And so I started making kind of like goodie bags for other people and just kind of passing them out. So my husband and I decided to make Fighting with Hope. And we pack chemo boxes for cancer patients all around the world. Fight, continue to fight, have hope, have faith. Surround yourself with the most amazing community. Ask for help. It is okay to ask for help. and accept help, because people do want to help you. There's a lot of people that have messaged me and they're like, this person has cancer, how do I help them? And that's part of the reason why I make the chemo box too, is just so like other people can send something to a cancer patient that's useful and helpful. And so I think that's I guess what I would say is, one, just like have hope. Two, fight for your life, and don't give up.